Due to the pandemic, the global aviation industry has suffered heavy losses. Although China's airlines are better off than in the West due to extensive government subsidies, domestic giants such as Air China, China Eastern, and China Southern still face a loss of 12.58 billion RMB in the 6 months since the Chinese border reopened on 8 January. A major reason for this is the slow resumption of international air traffic, especially on routes between China and the US, which have only recovered to 6% of pre-pandemic levels. The US is in no hurry to resume flights to China and is instead focusing on reviving routes to Europe and Australia. Despite a series of talks between China and the US, Washington is reluctant to open its airspace to Chinese carriers. On 29 October, only 24 flights per week are scheduled to start between the two countries. Meanwhile, China's inbound tourism is in an unprecedented slump. The number of foreign tourists visiting Beijing and Shanghai is only 10% of pre-pandemic numbers. Even veteran tour guides with 30 years of experience are facing a season without foreign tour groups for the first time. In addition, China's anti-espionage law, which came into force on 1st July, has severely restricted foreign business travel and significantly affected foreign direct investment in the first half of the year. Unlike most countries, China has not joined the Open Skies Agreement, which normally allows airlines to freely adjust their flights to meet demand, provided slots are available at the airport. Instead, flights to China are regulated by bilateral agreement with the other countries. Before the pandemic outbreak, the agreement between the US and China allowed both sides to operate up to 150 round-trip flights. After the pandemic outbreak, strict limitations reduced this number to only 8 flights per week from each country until May 2023. In June, the US agreed to increase the weekly flight quota for Chinese carriers from 8 to 12, to 18 from 1st of September, and finally to 24 on 29th of October. In return, China promised to increase the quota for US carriers. However, industry observers say that US carriers are unlikely to take full advantage of these additional flights immediately, mainly because of unfair competition at Chinese airports, which makes it difficult for them to secure prime gates and landing slots. At the same time, US airlines are worried about another possible wave of pandemic restrictions in China. Lengthy quarantine requirements, a lack of suitable hotel rooms, and difficulty finding willing crews for China-US routes are other challenges. In response, US airlines will have to make additional stopovers and hire extra staff willing to comply with quarantine regulations, which will increase costs. Despite the limited numbers of flights to China, US airlines are still profitable, and even if the number of flights were to double, the profits should remain healthy. Washington is in no hurry to open its airspace further to Chinese carriers, as US airlines need more time and resources to prioritize connections with Europe and Australia. Therefore, the major US airlines are urging the Biden administration to carefully and gradually reopen the US market to China. The US government says it will continue to consider how and when to treat Chinese airline flights to ensure a fair and competitive operating environment. Because of the problems with Russia airspace, US airlines have been particularly wary about taking on more flights to China. Since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, American airlines have been avoiding flights through Russia airspace, increasing the cost of China routes and limiting opportunities for emergency landing on these detours. Beijing, on the other hand, is eager to increase flights to the United States, following an agreement in May to boost round-trip flights between China and the United States from 8 to 12 per week. All 4 new planes agreed to the terms set by the United States, avoiding Russian airspace. This demonstrates that Beijing is willing to bear greater flight expenditures to increase the frequency of flights. With the drop of flights, it's clear that inbound tourism is in steep decline. In the first half of 2023, Beijing received only 407,900 international visitors, just 11% of the total for the whole of 2019. In Shanghai, there were 1.2 million international visitors, just 14% of the same period in 2019. This slump isn't unique to Shanghai, but a nationwide problem. The Wall Street Journal notes that only 52,000 people participated in travel agency organized trips in the first quarter of this year, a drop of almost 98% from the 3.7 million in the same period of 2019. Alongside the sharp decline in the number of international tourists, their countries of origin have also shifted drastically. Hong Kong, Macau, Thailand, Japan, and South Korea are the top sources of visitors to mainland China as of July 2023. Most notably, 78% of visitors are from Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan, highlighting the declining number of tourists from Western countries. Tourism experts are under tremendous stress in the glooming environment. Snow Yu, a tour guide, is one example. Her firm once thrived, even serving executives from the Golden State Warriors and Georgia Tech basketball teams. Now that his income has been cut in half, he has been forced to shift to domestic tourism. Mr. Tai, who has had a souvenir shop near the 13 Tombs in Beijing for more than a decade, calls the current scenario a severe blow. He notices a comparable decline in business climates, not only in Beijing, but also in Shanghai and Tianjin. Mr. Tai attributed the loss of two major factors: the deteriorating global political climate, particularly the sharp deterioration in Sino-US ties, and the drop in the Chinese stock market. Currently, he only receives a handful of customers each day. An experienced tour guide with 3 decades of expertise says openly that this is the first time he has seen such a barren tourist sector, with not a single foreign tour group in existence. He claims that the majority of tour guides companies have completely turned their focus on domestic tourism. A guy returning to Wuhan from Hong Kong observes that despite being a big international city, Hong Kong is strikingly devoid of foreigners. In Hong Kong, I saw only a few foreigners, and virtually none throughout my trip in mainland China, he says. The Zhangjiajie National Forest Park is in the same boat. According to statistics, the park received only 25,600 overseas visitors in the first 5 months of this year, a startling decrease from the 500,000 over the same period in 2019. These on-the-ground observations and data eloquently depict the numerous constraints and obstacles affecting China's tourist industry, from small vendors to seasoned tour operators, from huge cities to nature reserves. Rising tensions with Western countries have resulted in a growing number of tourists avoiding China in recent years. According to Wall Street publications, this opinion is shared not only with China's domestic tourist sector, but also internationally. Every year, the Pennsylvania-based boutique travel service Friendly Planet Travel sends up to 1,500 guests to China. Peggy Goldman, the company's founder and president, claims that they have received no queries to trips to China since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. She said that China is indeed ranked low among online search destinations, and that she said there are a lot of hostility around the China theme. In a grave turn of events, the newly revised counter-espionage law enacted by the Chinese Communist Party came into effect on July 1st, significantly expanding the definition of espionage activities. This has urged foreign companies to heighten their vigilance, subsequently triggering a retreat of foreign investment from China. Moreover, it has instilled a palpable fear in Chinese and Hong Kong students planning to return from abroad, as they worry that once they re-enter the country, they might not be allowed to leave again. Notably, the US government had already issued a travel advisory in June, alerting American citizens to reconsider any planned journeys to China. This warning primarily originates from concerns of arbitrary law enforcement, encompassing potential exit bans and unwarranted detentions. What are the underlying concerns that the recently implemented anti-espionage law raises for entering foreigners and Chinese citizens? According to insiders, a campaign for the counter-espionage law began in June and progressed in 3 key steps, primarily targeting overseas arrivals. The objectives include information isolation from the free world as well as financial gain. The Chinese government will refuse entry to those who have gained a global reputation for being anti-communist and whose every move could potentially create an international incident. Returning Tiananmen Square activists like Wang Dan and Wu Kaixi, for example, is completely implausible. The global media would latch on the instant they stepped foot in the nation, adding unnecessary hassles. China invites people with less clout in the anti-communist camp back with open arms. This measure intends to establish the climate of economic openness and reform desired by President Xi Jinping. Many overseas Chinese, particularly the elder generation, are unable to shake their longing for their motherland. Relevant Chinese authorities even seek out these persons' families, pushing them to return and implying that previous complaints may be erased. Internationally inconspicuous persons such as scientists and executives from major corporations may often enter China with ease, particularly citizens of the United States, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. They may, however, become captive upon arrival, especially if they have not made overt anti-communist settlements online. These jailed people typically have substantial assets and resources in their own nations. Chinese authorities use various sorts of coercion to force them to give up some of their money in exchange for the freedom to go. The counter-espionage law provides substantial methods and power for putting these strategies into action. The term of national security encompasses not only military security, but also political, economic, cultural, and social security. The National Security Department has the authority to declare security control zones, albeit the public is not informed of which regions are included in such zones. As a result, any foreign individuals could advertently enter these locations and be arrested by the Chinese government for illegally entering a security control zone and endangering national security. The National Security Department has nearly limitless interpretations and operational leeways in the case, with foreign embassies in China having little to no say. Quite a number of foreign nationals, including 17 Japanese citizens, have been imprisoned in China on espionage-related allegations in recent years. Canadians Michael Kovrig and Michael Spravor, Australian journalist Chen Lei, Australian writer Yang Henjun, and an employee of the Japanese pharmaceutical business Astellas Pharma are among those detained. Furthermore, in 2017, activist Li Mingqi became the first Taiwanese person to be imprisoned for subversion. A Hong Kong female student studying in Japan recently had her passport confiscated upon return to Hong Kong under the Hong Kong version of the national security law. Many foreign businessmen have now left China, and many foreign researchers and journalists are hesitant to return owing to safety concerns. Corporate executives planning business travels to China are likewise taking the position of avoiding China unless absolutely necessary. Political tensions and a slump in tourism could potentially have a detrimental influence on Chinese investment. According to Rhodium Group data, foreign direct investment into China was only $20 billion in the first quarter of this year, a significant decrease from the $100 billion recorded in the same period last year. In previous sessions, we addressed the plethora of macro-level reasons why international tourists are afraid to visit China. Now let's zoom in on the micro level using a more intimate lens to examine people's worries about visiting the country. Many foreigners have learned about China's negative aspect through the media. Some cheap meat in China has questionable provenance, occasionally resorting to rat meat or even animal carcasses. In addition, gutter oil, a health danger, is often used in some establishments. Foreign visitors are likewise concerned about air pollution, particularly smog. Overpricing and being enticed into certain locations to be milked for excessive spending are all too prevalent for foreigners in China, far from isolated cases.
So, 这是第一次我来郑州，觉得景色非常漂亮，对吧？你看这么多人都来这儿拍照。但是呢，6块钱一瓶，6块钱一瓶。Oh,
Okay, get ready. Okay, put your stuff in your backpack. Okay. So, what's the price of it?
Both together, they were quite expensive. I think I got ripped off. I think it was.
Got ripped off?
It was 90. Yeah.
Where did you get it? Over here?
Here. I didn't.
What's the price of it? Excuse me.
Together, 90.
90. Okay.
Yeah, that
Reasonable.
The
It's
big
all right,
one I got was
because-
28.
Yeah, there's a forbidden city stuff will cost you more.
Travelers must also exercise caution with their goods, avoid flaunting riches in public, and remain vigilant against theft. Other inconveniences include contaminated tap water and public facilities that frequently lack toilet paper. The streets can sometimes be rather dirty, which can make foreigners feel uneasy or even repelled. In terms of communication, international websites and chat apps such as Google, Instagram, and Twitter are unavailable in China. Although VPN-enabled Wi-Fi rental options are available, they are expensive. In terms of accommodate, only about 28% of hotels in China are licensed to accommodate international visitors. Hotel prices have recently climbed as well, unquestionably raising the expense of travel. Many major tourist destinations need pre-booking via WeChat mini programs, a channel that most foreign travelers do not frequently use. Even if they are successful in downloading and installing WeChat, they may discover that the login mechanism does not enable passport recognition. Foreign visitors must additionally deal with visa and flight route issues. Flights to China frequently require a diversion to the Middle East for a layover due to Russian airspace restrictions. Similarly, flights from the United States frequently demand more travel miles. These factors not only increase travel time and fuel consumption, but also deter airlines from adding more flights, raising the expenses of tourists. For example, a 16-page online visa application form made stump even a German visitor prepared to invest extra time and money. For a Chinese visa, US travelers must have round-trip tickets with a minimum of 3 nights accommodation or an invitation from a Chinese citizen or organization. Meanwhile, visas are rarely required to visit to Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, Japan, and South Korea. And nations such as Laos, Cambodia, and Indonesia only require a visa upon arrival. As a result, many people prefer to visit other Asian countries. Travel is intended to be a relaxing and joyful experience, but with so many possible hazards and risks, many people are naturally hesitant to visit China. This begs the question, how can China successfully attract more Western tourists in the midst of increased geopolitical tension? The Chinese government surely has its hands full.